Making moves. It's Tuesday at 10 a.m. What's up, Tim Vest? How you doing, man?
Hey, not too bad. Better than last week, so that's always good.
Hey, what do they say? Count your blessings and get 1% better every day, right?
Yeah, yeah. Counting blessings for sure, and so striving for that 1% too. So.
Yeah. Well, hey, we got a really fun episode today. This has come up recently, and because we're doing a lot of stuff in the background right now, and this had come up, and we really wanted to talk about the importance of how people put too much reliance on reports. Reports are computer generated things, right? It's artificial intelligence. There's no real human behind these different reports and things that are putting these metrics and these deals together. I mean, we're clearly talking about real estate, and I don't want to mention any names on these certain reports, but these reports are not the industry. I mean, they're considered the industry standard, but that's where there's a lot of value that's missed, right? When you're local in the market and you know the market better than anybody else, that's when you're able to really be able to set yourself apart from somebody else that is just relying on these reports. Tim, talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing in these reports and why being somebody local in the market is going to be more beneficial for yourself as well as your investors.
Yeah. So, and Tim, really good point because the reports are there as a guide. Really, they're not the they're not the end all be all. And certainly nothing in the report is going to, or some of these metrics that are gathered through these online systems, nothing in those is going to beat actual like boots on the ground, getting into neighborhoods and walking properties. Like Tim, when we were down in Mobile, Alabama, and we had an idea of the property, right? But we really started to dial in what that property could do, and we started physically walking into the places next door, the other properties next door. What
Yeah.
are they actually charging for rent? What do the inside of those properties look like compared to what we were buying, where we were going to go? And it really started to become kind of an aha moment that hey, we could actually go a little bit further than we thought we could, based off the reports. And that's because the reports are general, right? Like you think about it, something that everybody on here is probably familiar with is, you think about it when you buy a home and they do an appraisal. And a lot of times, guys, these are desktop appraisals if you're familiar with that term. And that literally is what it sounds like, a guy sitting behind a computer running a few comps around the house you're buying, and he's doing it from his desktop. He's not actually showing up on the property. Um, and a lot of times those are off. In fact, in the last 2 years, I refinanced my own home, and I had to go back and point out to them, why are you using these comps over here? Here's four that are much better comps, more actually associated in my neighborhood that have sold for X. And these are the comps you should be using. And they agreed. They were like, no, you're right. These are better comps. Um, Same thing in the real estate, in the commercial real estate space that we've been seeing lately, especially in some markets where I live and breathe. Have literally lived there, at some point in time. And Tim, we saw it with one of our lenders. One of our lenders came back and was like, "Oh, here's the comps we're showing," and I actually kind of said to him, "Hey, those I appreciate you pulling those because they make my property look really, really good. But those really aren't comps. They're 10 miles away in a completely different part of the city, and as anybody knows, like cities can have very, very diverse pockets, that are only like a mile or two big, right? And in this particular case, the lender was using stuff that's like, much different area, and it was to me just not actually like reflective of what the property we were looking at could do. So I actually said to him, "Hey, within a 2 mile radius, here's three properties that are 100% direct comps to this. We don't need to go pump this property up by using these places that, quite frankly, somebody could come back and argue against. Here it is right here. And we don't need to go use those because these support what we're trying to say as well." Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know what? I feel like we're discovering as we're talking about this out loud is just that sometimes when you get certain reports, appraisals included, that people just think that that is all end all, right? When you get an appraisal back or you get any kind of report back, that doesn't mean anything. That's just what they thought and they pulled, right? And you're talking about these desktop appraisals and these people that don't really know their markets as well as somebody like yourself in your own market, or like me in Wilmington. Like, I know Wilmington better than most people because I live here, right? I have lived here before. So I know, like, this property that just came up for sale is like, oh, this will never be anything other than student housing ever. Just, that's just what it is. But the whole point is that you can bring value to your partners and to your group by having the local knowledge, or partnering with somebody that has the local knowledge, so that you can challenge people when appropriate. And when appropriate is obviously a very gray area, but you definitely want to be, you have to be willing to voice your opinion based on your information, your knowledge, and your understanding, in order to make everybody's lives better, whether that's like getting a higher appraisal, or whatever. Like, that's probably one of the best examples, but that's really what it is at the end of the day, is being able to speak up and partner with the right people that have that local knowledge.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this touched on it a little bit a couple of weeks ago with Kyle, when I was on site at that other property.
Yeah.
And that's so true. When it comes down to a lot of things, in this particular case, we've had an investor recently who really wanted to see. They really wanted to see like the industry reports, and I'm like, hey, I'm happy to give it to you, but they're not going to be accurate. And here's why. And I was able to show them the industry reports and how they were taking in, like, the same thing we're talking about here, taking in comps that's 10 miles away in a completely different neighborhood, 15 miles away in a completely different section of town. And then pull them back and say, hey, here, let me show you some of my own comps, which are, and I'm not trying to, explode my business plan or anything like that. In fact, some of my comps were more in the $180,000 door range. But if I'm using this one that's 15 miles away, it would support $262 a door.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I know that's not legit. I know that part of town, and that's not the kind of folks that are living over here. And but we don't need to do that, because 182 a door right next door, and we're buying it at 140, right? So it's like, I don't need to go over there for that. Let me talk about exactly in this exact area, this direct neighborhood. And hey, we can just go a mile and a half away at another property that's just down the street, and it's going for 232 a door.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it looks like somebody else, challenged the appraisal on their fourplex. I mean, great job, right? I mean, you got to put in the work, you got to put in the research, and people are willing to go back and change their assumptions, because at the end of the day, they're just assumptions. Like, these people don't know everything. Nobody knows everything. And if you can challenge their assumption based on what you know and what you think to be true and correct, why don't you? Right? I mean, look, this guy, I don't know who Facebook user is, but, increased the appraisal by $40,000. I mean, on a $400,000 fourplex, that's 10%. And that's significant.
Yeah. And here's a good comment. So another Facebook user: doesn't everyone think their own market is better than others? And yeah, I don't disagree. Everybody kind of loves their own market. But I think more to the point, what we're talking about here is not so much being better or worse than anything else. It's more just a higher level of accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
Because like with the lender example I gave, like, part of the reason I went back and wanted to correct that is I didn't want to get far into the process and have a lender come back and question our comps.
Oh,
that's what I was. That's what I was worried about. I was like, I don't want to give a false purpose here or a false view here. Let's narrow down our comps and give something which is almost beyond question, right? Like, you can't question a similar asset a mile away in this area, right? You just can't. Like, it is a comp, and similar vintage, similar size, similar unit size, similar breakdown, and here's a comp a mile away that more than supports what we're asking for on this one.
It also makes me kind of think about how when people write news articles and things, or even, like blog posts, everything that you read anywhere has a bias to it. And appraisals could have a bias to it. And it's your job to use your own research and analytical skill set and your expertise in the market in the area to prove that person wrong. And it's kind of interesting. Some people are just willing to kind of roll over and die when somebody tells them it is worth X. right? But at the end of the day, it's not, right? And it's do you have a backbone to stand up for what you believe in? And it seems like a very specific and a very tall response to a very small question, but really at the end of the day, it's your word against theirs. And just because they work for this company and they do it professionally doesn't mean they know what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting is sometimes if you really dive into it, and I get a little bit of I kind of geek out on some of this stuff sometimes. Like if you really dive into it, and Tim can appreciate this because we're buying two properties that are within about a mile of each other. So I have two reports, one for each property. And even though they're similar vintage, within a mile of each other, and actually one property uses the other as a comp, the other property does not use the other property as a comp. And then the comp set across the two properties is completely different. The report is from the same source, from the same company that produces this.
That's
and the comp sets for two properties that are in the same neighborhood within this city are different, even though one of the properties uses the other property as a comp. And that should tell you a little something, right? Like I can't figure out their algorithm for how they pull comps. It seems a little random to me, especially, like, hey, when we all go, and I'll call this one out because I think we all use it. When you go on Rent-A-Meter or Rentometer, whatever you call it, when you go on that, like when you're looking for rents, if there's enough comps within a half-mile radius, do you expand to a 2-mile radius?
Mm-mm.
No, there's no reason to. In fact, it can skew the results. Now if you have to because there's not enough comps, yeah, you got to expand your radius a bit. But the more you can dial into your radius, in my opinion, a lot of times that's a better analysis.
Oh yeah. The further you go away from your property, the weaker your argument gets.
Right.
The common saying that everyone knows is that city is block by block, right? So if you're including a comp on one street versus another, you want it to be on the same block, so you know exactly what this property is worth compared to one that's 3 blocks away. That's you don't go there when the street lights are on, kind of thing. And it's not a complex idea, but sometimes people make it more complex than it can be. It's ultimately what I think is happening is the psychology of people is they want to see in writing numerical and analytical data when there's no real trust there. And obviously it's there's always there's something to be said there to make sure that you're trusting the operator you're investing your money with.
Yeah,
but
sure.
Sometimes people just don't trust the operator, and my response to that is you don't have a good enough relationship with that person yet. So I don't think you're personally ready to invest your money because you're just looking at everything on a spreadsheet. Well, I mean, all I got to do is adjust the cap rate and bada bing, bada boom, you got a great deal, right? But you trust me as an operator not to do that.
Yeah, and then dial it down. So now we're talking about sales price comps, right? Now dial it down to even at the rent level. I mentioned Rent-A-Meter, whatever. I know we all pronounce it different. But even with that analysis, and then the analysis from some of the industry standard reporting, Tim, when we start looking at something in an area where we have a trusted property manager, for example, what's one of the first things we do? Even if we always have that information, call the property manager. Like, what we're looking at something in this area. What are you getting? What do you see? And that a lot of times that information doesn't line up to what the reports are showing.
Yeah.
Tim and I have a property. Sorry, Tim and I have a property down just outside of Charleston, South Carolina. And if you look at what the reports show and what the analytics show, you would never know that we're getting the rents that we're getting on this property. The reports don't show it. But we know in the market, our property manager in the market knows what they can get in that market, and we're getting it without any struggle at all. So that's a real life example of, hey, sometimes you really just got to get down and dirty and get in the market, start making phone calls, and go a little bit beyond just some of the standard reporting you see.
Yeah, look at this comment from Daniel Reddick. He said that he did the same thing. He contested the appraisal on a property in Wrightsville Beach, which is in Wilmington, North Carolina. For those that don't know, the appraiser used comps from Charlotte, which is 3 hours and 45 minutes away from Wrightsville Beach, as a comp. And his original appraisal was off by millions. So I remember speaking to Daniel about this when this came in. And seemed like a little bit of some time ago now. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a small residential property or a large commercial property. Appraisers, you need to trust your analysis, trust your market research, trust your gut. If you truly and wholly feel that something is off in the appraisal, say something. Ask the question. I mean, that was kind of, this is a nod to my previous boss at my W-2 job. But she would always say that, it's my job to ask the question. Even if everyone thinks they assume they know the right answer, just ask the question, put it out there, and invite people to challenge you and poke holes in your theory, because you never know what you're going to uncover if you ask the question. And like, if Daniel didn't ask the question of this appraiser, maybe Daniel didn't ask, and then the appraiser's like, yeah, I use comps in Charlotte. Well, then he's like, whoa, wait a second. You're not even in the same area code or zip code or anything like that.
Yeah, and even within areas, right? Like Tim, you live down in Wilmington, and Wrightsville Beach does not equal downtown Wilmington.
Oh, not even close. Yeah,
it's different. So
different.
even using comps just a few miles away in downtown Wilmington is not going to give you a real accurate view of like once you cross that bridge, right? Or those bridges. How many is it? 2, 3. So yeah, I mean, and then one thing I want to bring up, and I got to give Julie a shout out here, because guys, Julie's out of in the Raleigh area, and she would know what she's talking about here with what she does. She knows how that kind of the appraisal process works on the backside. So these guys, they're contractors, and they're just doing their job. So this isn't a knock on them, right? But you got to understand how the process works, and just understand that their word is not the final word, right? It is open to negotiation and can be debated. I guess that's one way to look at it.
Right. Yeah. This is also another good comment. I mean, there's so many different factors that go into achievable rent: exact location on the street, unit configuration, views, distance to amenities, availability in the market, supply and demand. I mean, there's a million different things that go into achievable rent. So I really love this comment. I really love this comment. I think it's really powerful.
Sorry for the distraction, folks. Tim and I got a closing coming up in a couple of days, so we got to be on the ball. If you ever want to know what like the days before closing looks like, you're sitting by your phone and your computer, ready to roll at the drop of a hat. So, but.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, we got a closing on Thursday, so getting blown up left and right from text messages and emails and phone calls.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, you're, and that's a really good comment by the Facebook user. You're right. Exact location, unit configuration, and I'll talk about that one for a second. Unit configuration and unit size. Like one of the comps in this area that I was talking about or alluding to earlier. One of the comps down the street, if you look at a price per unit sales price, it was low. It was in, I think, like the 88,000 a unit range, and we're post renovation around 127. But if you dive a little bit deeper, that's a very small property. It's all studios. There's only like I think there's maybe 12, 17, something like that on the property. I actually looked at buying it. Yeah, I actually looked at buying it back in May of this year, I think, or April. And the price per unit is low, but that has to do more with the configuration of the property and the size of the units. Studios shouldn't go for the same price as a 1-bedroom, right? You shouldn't pay the same. A studio shouldn't sell for the same price as a 2-bedroom. But if you took a little bit deeper dive into the numbers there, what you noticed was the per square foot price on that property was through the roof. It was like $532 a square foot.
Woo!
Yeah, and we're nowhere close to that on ours. Nowhere close. So sometimes it's not all about unit price, right? It's start to look at that. Start to look at some of the other factors that come into play there.
Yeah. It's a whole. Man, I wish there was a clear-cut way to just say, this is what it is. But it's not. There's so many factors that go into it. location, size, layout. I mean, like literally everything. Like going back to this this comment was beautiful. Whoa. Like it was perfect, right? I mean, because there's just so much subjectivity to it at the end of the day, especially when you're doing the sales comp approach. But what I love is the income-based approach is exactly why we do commercial real estate, because the income and the expenses are what they are. The NOI is what it is. You can adjust the NOI based on how well or badly you operate a property. And the market cap rate is what it is, and bada bing, bada boom, like that's the value of the property, right? I don't like that subjectivity part of a sales comp approach. I love the income based approach. I mean, I've talked about it on a bunch of the podcasts that I've been on. That's why I got into commercial real estate, because I got burned on the first appraisal I ever got on my residential. I bought one residential property and got burned on the appraisal. And I was like, wait a second, how do I use the income-based approach? Because that's the number I thought it was going to appraise for, but you're using the lower one over here, which is the sales price. And of course, it was subjective based on the appraiser and finishes and all this other kind of stuff. And like this doesn't make sense. So this is an investment property. It's a business. It makes money. This is how it should work.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit more cut and dry. There's still fluidity into it for sure.
Yeah.
But always just stay on top of that. And ultimately, guys, what we're really getting down to here is we're not knocking appraisers, we're not knocking these industry standard reports, because they all have their place, 100%. They're one of the first places you look, right? Like when you're trying to do a deal and you're trying to do that initial analysis before you spend your time going somewhere. They're a great place to get an idea of the general range, right? The general range of what you should be looking at.
Yeah.
But like really just getting in there and knowing things, boots on the ground, walking properties, asking people what they're paying for their rent. I actually had on this property yesterday, one of the guys who's looking to invest in it. And I love this. I absolutely love this. Sometimes I think folks think that we don't like questions from investors, but hey, we don't mind them at all. I loved what this guy did. He happened to be in the area. He asked for the address. He went by and he checked out the area. He got out, walked around the property. I don't recommend doing that a ton, but he did get out and walk around. And there was a guy across the street living in another rental unit. And he was like, hey, what are you getting for that? And the guy told him, and he was like, man, this place looks a lot better than that one. And the guy who was renting it was like, yo, no, I agree. He goes, this place is not all that well updated. That one's way more updated, and this is what I pay. And, and he got out and kind of did his boots on the ground, like the same stuff I've been doing for quite some time, the same stuff Tim does. And that level of detail is going to beat any kind of report that anybody's giving you that's just generated from, just collecting online data.
Yeah, I mean, dude, really comes back to like one of the main things that we work on with our coaching students is picking a single market. A lot of the problems that we see from people that are trying to get into this industry is they want to invest everywhere. The number one thing that causes people inaction is they don't want to miss out on a potential opportunity in Houston, in Austin, in Dallas, in Charlotte, in Raleigh, in Miami, in Tampa, in Jacksonville, in Charleston. Like they want to look at deals in all of these major markets because they don't want to miss the opportunity of being able to do a deal, when really you don't even know what a deal looks like because you don't know anything about those markets. So the best thing that you could do if you're trying to do what Tim and I do is pick one market, focus on one market, build relationships in one market, understand red comps and locations and zip codes in one market, and focus there, build those relationships so that you can get access to those deals. And that's how you're going to be able to tell the difference between if your industry reports are correct or not, because you've been to those places, you've walked the markets, you've analyzed every single deal in this town, you talk to all the property management companies, you know what the insurance quotes are going to roughly be, you know what the rents potentially are going to be, you know how the taxes are calculated, you know everything, you know the entire recipe of what goes into the underwriting of finding a good deal in that market. That is what's going to set you apart from being able to find a good deal versus somebody that's not, is that you're very specific with your time. Amen. Oh, can I get an amen? God, I preach it. Like, oh my God, I preach this, because seriously, this is how you find your deals. Just become an expert in one market. It's all you need. There's so much opportunity in every single market. Oh,
yeah. It's funny that you talk about that because like Tim and I do stuff in North and South Carolina and also Georgia, but North and South Carolina for the most part. And one of the questions we get quite a bit is because somebody will see our underwriting in North Carolina and they'll see that our taxes are estimated differently than something we've shown them in South Carolina, and everybody just kind of assumes taxes are taxes. North Carolina and South Carolina do taxes different. South Carolina's on sale, North Carolina's on a schedule. So you gotta those are things you gotta know, and it really gets your underwriting better. And then hey, you're gonna learn things as you go too. One of the beautiful things I learned this week, man, is on build to rent single family portfolios. The insurance is way better than I thought it would be.
Yeah, right. Then funny you say that now. I've actually seen like 3 or 4 articles this morning alone on LinkedIn that the amount of construction starts of build to rent single family home communities is like quadrupled in the last 6 months.
Oh yeah, institutional is moving into that like you would not believe.
Yeah.
And Julie on here that I mentioned earlier could probably talk to you about some of that. She's connected to a bunch of developers, and that's a big strategy right now, guys. Like build to rent is a big thing.
Oh, huge, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest, I still don't fully understand it, but I haven't dedicated any time to become an expert in that market either, right? So like I know what my lane is, I stay in my lane, and yeah, I'll kind of branch off from my lane as I, have the capacity to do so. But again, it comes back to my soapbox rant of picking one market. It's also picking one lane of knowing what you're good at and specializing in it. And then as you have the mental capacity to expand, you can. But like if you're just trying to get started, focus on one thing or one market or one type of real estate, self-storage, multifamily apartments, triple net lease, build to rent, whatever the hell you want it to be. Just focus on one thing.
Yeah. There's a lot of great opportunities out there in real estate, folks. It doesn't have to be multifamily. Our man Randall Broyles, killing it in self storage.
Yeah.
I know some guys. I mean, one of Joe Fairless's right hand man, Ash Patel, right? I mean, all he does is commercial retail, killing it. So there's lots of ways to skin this cat, and Tim and I just really like multifamily.
I love it. I'm good at it. I know it. And it gives me confidence when we're raising money from investors. Like I know what I'm talking about. And that's why they're investing with us, is because we know what we're talking about. It's the only thing we try to focus on. I'm not trying to, do everything underneath the sun, because when you're trying to catch all the raindrops, like, nothing's ever going to be successful. So, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, guys, boots on the ground. Get out there, do your market research. Call those brokers. They know, a lot of them know it, especially some independent guys. You guys saw Kyle. We'll mention a guy named Chris. There's some folks in the Raleigh area, Michael and T. I really, love their information as well. Call, rely on your property manager, call the brokers, get on the ground, visit the areas, and live and breathe it for a while, man. There's no better way to understand like what you're doing with deal analysis than doing those things.
Yep. Yeah. Christina, to answer your question here, how to nicely say no thank you is pick up the phone and talk to them. Tell them why you're not interested in that. That's it. There's no secret sauce. Just pick up the phone and have a conversation. But all right, a little housekeeping before we get off. I made a post yesterday. We have one coaching spot left for our group, which will be starting after Labor Day. We figured it's probably better just to wait till after Labor Day, and then we'll do our program from there. So we got one spot left. If you're interested in our coaching, reach out. Additionally, our real estate and race cars events is going to be on November 18th and 19th in Atlanta. We're going to be driving 911 Porsches on the racetrack. We got a couple awesome speakers. They're still making sure everything clears out with their schedule. So expect more stuff on that in the future. And as soon as we get everything buttoned up in the next 2 weeks or so, we'll have all that information on our website so you can buy your ticket if you're interested in going, because 20 people, that's it. No more, no less. That's it. So it's going to be a really small room, really great connections to be made, awesome conversation, and a really fucking fun event. I mean, who drives race cars and talks about real estate? I've never seen it before. So I'm super pumped about this. It's been in the making now for a couple months on our end. I know that it was one of my goals to do something like this year. So I'm super pumped about it.
Yeah. And guys, small rooms, really, really good connections. Some of the folks Tim and I do business with, we met in small rooms.
Mm-hmm.
Like the big networking events, those really, really have their place for sure. But man, I'm telling you, these small rooms where you really get to spend 24, 36, 48 hours with just 5, 6, 7, 10 people.
Yep.
That's the connections that you're going to make when you end
Yep.
up doing business with somebody.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I've only lent money to one person as a private lender before, and I don't plan on ever doing it really with anybody else. But the only reason I did it was because I met them in a room of 16 people, and I built a really great relationship with them. So you never know; it might not materialize overnight, but you might meet. I mean, people that we're working with now, I met them initially a year ago, and now we're working together as business partners. So things
Yeah.
take time. So invest in relationships today so that you have those investments into your relationship capital and you can utilize them in the future. So, I mean, if you're interested in something like that, stay tuned. We'll have more information and really excited about putting this event on.
Facebook user, you want a ticket, just let us know.
Yeah.
We'll hook you up with that.
Yeah. So, all right, guys. Well, have a great week and we'll see you next week. Adios.